Hi guys, most of you have submitted your research project questions to me online and I've given you feedback, so make sure that you go through those and read my feedback and let me know if you have any questions. There seem to be some commonalities in maybe some confusion, so I want to clear that up for you, particularly related to what am I talking about with a research proposal question or your actual investigative question. So let's take a look real quick at the assignment. I'm going to toggle between views here. Let's open up the handout that I gave you with the research assignment, the project assignment. You'll notice that I gave you some examples of different types of questions, and then I talked about how would you propose a research project, and I think that's what might be confusing people. That's really where we're getting here, guys, is that we want you to come up with how would you then design an experiment or a study to answer a question related to your overarching question. And I'm not talking about something you would go out and do more literature searches on. The literature search should support this. It should all be related. But I want you to think about some of the different methods that we're going to learn in class or that we've already learned in class or that you've read about when you're going through your project and come up with what you would propose doing. So some methods. So for example, let's look at this one right here. If you had the question, that overall question of how would lynx be affected by patch cuts, a beetle-killed lodgepole pine in northern Colorado, you have these sub-questions about forest types, structure types, how they respond to different harvesting methods. But then down here, you're going to propose a research project. You're going to propose and design a project that will attempt to answer your investigative question. For example, perhaps you're going to recommend sampling for lynx in areas that have been cut and those that have not been cut. And you may learn things like the time since cut matters, the species of trees matters. So you are going to propose research that takes into account those variables. You might go in and say, we're going to sample lynx in these 4 different habitat types and see if they're utilizing them differently. That's what I'm talking about, your research proposal. So it should be very specific. You need to think about a site, an area. You need to think about what you've learned that might drive how you do that research question. So I don't need you to revise your proposal yet, but you need to be thinking about that because it's the final piece to this puzzle. So have it in mind of what you're thinking you'd like to do, but as you're researching some of your sub-questions, you might learn that it actually would be better to do a slightly different project, or maybe something else matters that you don't know of yet because you haven't done that background research. So I just wanted to clear up that that's where we're going with it. Let's do one more. Maybe we're looking at this. Will raising the density of mule deer in northern Colorado increase the frequency of CWD? You've answered through your literature search, you've answered more of that background stuff that you need to know. And then you might propose something like sampling different populations of mule deer to determine if the rate of CWD differs among different densities of deer populations. You may want to consider whether or not they're exposed to the same range or if there's you need to sample in different ranges. So that's where you're going. You're going toward thinking about designing a project that helps you answer one of those questions. The management piece, remember this is a wildlife management piece, so you're going to have to hone down these big broad questions and think about like, okay, what could we ask on a local level that might get us more knowledge about that big question. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is, well, where do you go next? What do you do? I'm in D2L here, and you'll notice that under course content you have a whole tab called semester project, so I sure hope you have found that by now. Your next step is to start researching those questions. So how do you do that? Folks, please use the library resources. You can use Google Scholar, you can use regular Google, but you may be asked to purchase full articles. They're available to you for free if you go through the library. So how do you go through the library? Right here, here's a link on using library resources. If I click on it, it tells you everything you need to know, from how to go get a library card if you're on Larimer campus, or if you're on one of the other campuses, or online learning, so you can log into these databases. They've paid your way to use this information. And once you're into their databases, what the library subscribes to are these big databases that then have different journals all submit to them. So there's some overlap, and there's some that are specific to different content areas. So for example, in the sciences and in our area of sciences, Academic Search Premier seems to be a pretty good one. This EBSCO is a good one, and I also like this one down here, JSTOR. JSTOR seems to have a lot of articles related to wildlife and forestry from what I found. So if you can't find an article in one of the databases, you can look in another, because they all have different journals that they kind of have in their warehouse, so to speak. Journals can subscribe to different databases. So you'll see some overlap, and you'll see some that are one or the other. So step one, figure out how to log in to the library so you can access the databases. Step two, start doing some literature searches. Start searching for information on those sub-questions using these databases. And these videos right here, this whole thing is a list of videos that tells you how to do that. Okay, so once you start collecting data, how do you compile it so that you can use it later on? Because it is really easy to just get lost in reading article after article after article, and in the end you don't really remember anything they said, and you don't have it connected to your key learning points that you were looking for. So the next thing that I suggest is watching my video here on using a reference organizer. So a reference organizer is this, and this is also available to you in D2L, where you can write your the source of the article you're reading. You write that here so you can find it again later, and so that you know how to cite it. And then you write the questions that you're looking for up here. So what habitat type are links using? What structure type are links using? How does harvesting affect links? Whatever your topics are, you write them up here, and you can print 6 of these out if you want, and keep on going across the page with more questions. As you're reading your source, you write down notes on what you're finding under each of these topics. But that's covered in the video. So watch that video on how to use this. Print out as many of these as you want. And that is really what you need to do next. You need to start doing your research. You need 6 sources, and they need to be peer-reviewed sources. So no magazine articles, no websites that aren't an article count toward your 6. You can use those, but that's in addition to your 6. So I think that's enough to get you started. The last thing I want to point out, if you're having trouble with the writing piece, we have a whole writing support center on campus, and they will help you. They are there to help you become a better writer, and they can give you much better feedback than I can. So I encourage you to use them throughout this process. You can submit your work to them as you go. You can go and get advice. They're there to help you. So at the end, before it's due, I'm going to require you to submit your paper to the Writing Center at least once before you turn it in to me, but you can do it multiple times if you want to do it as you go. So I think that's it. I just wanted to kind of push you on the right track. The last thing I'll mention is many of you wrote questions that are marginally related to things we're going to learn in class. Some of you wrote specific questions, but some of you might want to consider changing your question as you learn more or as you start researching more. That is okay. Just make sure you clear it with me. So after the mortality lab on Friday, maybe you want to do a study on causes of mortality. Maybe you want to look at predator and mule deer information after next week's lesson. All of that is fine. Just clear it with me if you do change directions. And you may just choose to change directions because you can't find anything on the topic you picked. That's okay. Again, just communicate. So I hope that this helps. Please don't hesitate to email me if you have questions or concerns, and we'll go from there.